Welcome back to the Tapes Archive podcast, where we release interviews that have never been heard before. In this episode, we have one of prog rock's greatest keyboardists, Rick Wakeman. At the time of this interview in 1999, Wakeman was 50 years old and was promoting his new album, Return to the Center of Earth. In the interview, Wakeman talks about being homeless, who's better, Keith Emerson or him, what he learned from Robert Fripp, and owning up to your own truths. As always, we have music critic Mark Allen at the helm conducting the interview. Thanks for tuning in, and now it's time to open the vault.
I want to start out, but before I get to the center of the earth, I want to ask you a couple of personal things, if you don't mind. I had interviewed John Anderson a couple of years ago, and he said that you had become born again and that you were on the 700 Club renouncing Yes. Is that accurate?
No, it's complete junk.
Okay.
First of all, I'm not a born-again Christian. I've been a Christian since I was 5. I've been on the 700 Club, but I haven't been on the 700 Club for 7 years, 8 years. Certainly, I'm a fan of Yes. How on earth would I go on? No, I think too many walks in the mushroom fields.
Okay. Well,
that's complete and utter junk.
Yeah, I had asked him because, they went out on the last tour with that Russian keyboard player, and he had said that was the reason that you didn't go on that tour.
I mean, the reason I didn't go on the tour was it was a tour achieving nothing. To me, I'm a fan of the band apart from the times that I'm in it, and to me that band is a band that needs to be in big venues putting on spectacular shows. To me, a Yes show should be an event, not in sort of 1,200 seaters. And I felt that we hadn't got the music. We needed some time to put some real great music together. We were all playing well, but the quality of music wasn't there that we really needed to do. It needed John. It needed us to actually go back to our roots. And for me, that's from where John is so talented at coming up with great sweeping melody ideas, and that's where we should have been sort of starting all the music and that from, as we did, years ago, which creates what I call class Yes music. And I felt that, just going around and playing in smaller and smaller venues, the time could be better utilised by everybody spending some time, trying to gather new ideas, working with different people, so that when we got back to the table again, fresh, we weren't just sort of decent players, but we brought along new things to the table. Because if you just want to go out and play, which is fine, the best Yes tour for that, of being nostalgic, and it was the Union tour, which was just absolutely fantastic. So it really wasn't my cup of tea. It's not the way that I think it should be done. But good luck to them, and I do love the guys dearly, and I wish them lots of luck.
Okay, fair enough. I've also read, and I guess I've looked this up a little bit, but that you've been making records. You've really never stopped making records, have you? For the last 20 years, you've basically been recording in England, right? Or for the European market. Yeah,
well, what I did, and a lot of that was by necessity, if the truth be known, because, I'm 50 in a few days' time, and it's very easy when you're 50 to own up to a few things. And there was a period of time in the 80s which was really difficult for musicians like myself, because it was hard to get any form of record contract at all. It was hard to get agents to perform. You were persona non grata with young people. You were totally out of vogue. It was very difficult, and it wasn't just me. It was a lot of musicians and people who'd been around in the early 70s and whatever. Now, for those who'd been sensible, and when I say sensible, I mean those who had one wife, who'd stayed in the same band, who'd had the same management, who'd listened to their accountants and advisors, they'd all managed to put some money to one side, so they could ride the storm for a few years and then reappear. I'd made getting married a hobby. I'd been married 3 times. I'd had arguments with the tax authorities and lost the court cases, so that that had bankrupted me. Not bankrupted me, but basically cleaned me out. The 3 marriages were very expensive. I'd been in and out of bands, changed labels, and basically I didn't have a penny. I had absolutely nothing. And in fact, at one stage, it was in a period where I didn't even have a roof over my head, where I was sort of doing the famous sleeping on the park bench number, and which is no fun, believe you me.
You actually slept out?
Yeah, it got real bad at one stage. And it was very, very, very tough. But basically, then you look around and say, what can I do? I've got to do something. Can't get a record. Can't get arrested. It was get arrested sleeping on a park bench, but can't get arrested making a record. So I then looked around and realised that there was a lot of independent labels starting up all over the place. So I contacted different countries and different little labels and said, look, what sort of music can you sell that's like, are you looking for that you're not looking for to make current records, but something that can go on the shelf that will sell? For example, Japan, there was a little independent label that I got in touch with who don't exist anymore, but they were called Jimco, and they said, oh, listen, we would like you, can you do some rock synthesizer albums? And I said, yeah, what budget you got? So they had a very, very small budget, so I said, fine, okay, I'll do something. Australia, spoke to them, what do you want? Oh, well, we need some like quasi-classical piano album, that's what's doing quite well down there. Great, how much budget can you give me? A small budget, thank you. So then I went into Germany. They were looking for new age stuff. I went to all the different territories, and with the money that I put together, the budget, which was extremely small from all of these places, I had enough money to put together a decent enough sort of small studio that I could record them all in. And I worked out that once they'd been delivered, that the next small budgets I could actually start making it work a little bit. And so over a period of about 4 years, I produced about 30-odd different CDs for different markets around the world, and all on very, very small budgets. Whilst it kept me alive and kept me hanging on, it didn't solve the problems that I'd been in, and by the sort of the early 90s, the tax problems were so huge that I ended up selling all my royalty rights for everything in order to pay the bills. So that was another interesting area, because in about 94, I found myself starting again, which was pretty interesting because it pushes you. It's been an interesting time, to put it bluntly. So the reason there's been a lot of albums was purely a matter of necessity at the time.
When you're in that situation, what are you thinking? Because I'm looking, you're telling me this story, and this is the first I've ever heard of this, and I'm going, if I were in your position, I'd be going, I'm Rick Wakeman. I'm one of the greatest keyboard players ever. Why is this happening? How did you get through that? How did you deal with it?
Well, you do go through, exactly what you said. You do go through I'm feeling extremely sorry for myself. There's two things. One of the hardest things is to own up to the truth to yourself, which is, hold on a minute, I've screwed up my marriages. I'd not listened to the accountants. I'd argued with the tax authorities and lost big time. And really, I'd been fighting the establishment and lost. And when you own up to that, then that's half the battle. The hardest thing I had to swallow was not the fact that back then I lost everything. The hardest thing to swallow was all the people that I thought were my friends, road crew that had worked with me for years, that I'd had on retainers and paid really decent money to, just vanished. I couldn't even get any one of the crew who used to work for me to give me a lift to a railway station. They disappeared. That was the hardest thing to swallow, because people I'd worked with for 10 years who I thought were my friends, that's when I suddenly realised in this business I didn't have any. And I think that was harder to swallow than losing everything.
Did the guys in Yes know what you were going through?
I don't know, to be honest. I really honestly don't know. I've got a huge sense of pride, and it was just, I'm going to fight my way out of this. And if you want to do that, you do that. And my lovely wife, Nina, was tremendous. When we met, she actually said to me, she said, this is impossible, the mess you're in. She said, okay. She said, they've taken everything else away. She said, but they can't take your talent away. She said, you can wave the talent in their face. There's nothing they can do. They can't have that. So go out. She said, you've done it before, do it again. And it was great. And when you've got somebody sort of behind you, and then you start getting the odd break here and there, and things start picking up, and then you sort of steaming away, and eventually you from the lying down position, you're on your knees, and then you're sort of half standing up, and then you're standing up, and then you start winning again.
So you became like the diagram you always see of man emerging from the water from evolution, right?
Well, it's not far off that, yeah. The older you get, though, it's tough. It takes its toll, no doubt about it. It takes its toll on you physically. You can do these sort of things when you're 20 and 30, but it's a little tricky when you get up to my age now. But I like to look on the positive side of things. For example, if it hadn't all been so sour and so rotten or whatever, would I have pushed myself to do the things that I'm doing now? Or would I just been sitting back on my laurels going down the golf course every day,
I've been a fan of yours and of Yes and all that since basically I saw the Topographic Oceans tour. That was one of my first concerts. And,
all right.
And to the extent I ever thought about it, I always figured that guys like you and the rest of the guys in Yes and Tull and all those bands would, be around for a few years, and then they would take their multi-millions and, become gentlemen farmers somewhere in England, and that was always my vision. And what's happened has been just so, really unbelievable. In so many
a lot of people, if you were sensible, that's what you did.
Right.
If you stayed with the same band, you stayed with the same record company, you didn't change lineups, you didn't change managements, you didn't change wives, if you kept things on a stable footing, that's exactly what happens, exactly what you said.
Are there guys like that who who are around,
Well, people who did it sensibly, people like, like Roger Daltrey, who, classic example, like the Who, obviously, when Mooney died, that obviously that necessitates a change, but bands like Zeppelin, no change of lineup, the Who, no change of lineup, Queen, no change of lineup.
Except I've heard that Entwistle had no money, and I'd also heard that Daltrey was not doing great either, so that's...
Well, Daltrey, he's got his private enterprises things in the UK. He has one of the biggest trout farms in the country. That's got to be worth millions and millions. And John Entwistle has, if John just sold his main house in the UK, could probably solve the Kosovo crisis.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think those guys are doing too bad.
All right, so then I've heard wrong. Okay.
I might be right. I may be mortgaged up to the hill, but I wouldn't. I don't know.
Okay, now to return to the center of the earth. So you must be doing okay now, because this must have cost a fortune.
Yeah, it was about $800,000 worth.
Oh my God!
It was not a cheap project to do. This was something I never ever dreamed I would ever get the chance to do. To be brutally honest with you, again, it's down to money. I still don't have any sort of liquid cash. I've got a house and a nice house and my studio and things, but I don't have liquid cash anymore. So it's not something that I could say, hey, listen, this is something that I wanted to do, therefore I'll do it. So you're reliant upon a major record company who looks at something like this and says, hey, we see the potential in this. This is something that we think should be done, something that we want to do, and so therefore we will invest in it.
Right. But when you made the first one, financially, I imagine that people weren't real concerned, and I bet people were a little bit more concerned about what it would cost to do this in 1999.
Well, that's right. Well, the original one, I got $35,000 from R&M, and I added about another 20 myself. So it was about $55,000, the first one cost. And that was recorded live on 16-track of analog, and then some mixing in the studio, which it wasn't really much to mix, because it was all just 3 mics that hung over the top of the orchestra, so it wasn't that difficult to do. This time round, we're talking a different ballgame. We're talking a lot of money, a lot of recoupment for a record company, and also a lot of understanding from a record company, because there was nothing I could play them that could give them a clue as to what it was going to be like. I couldn't say, well, it's going to be like this. Have a listen to this. This will give you a clue. I almost sort of shied back from saying, well, one of the things I want to do is get Ozzy Osbourne singing in front of a symphony orchestra, because I thought maybe if I say that out too loud, it'll never get done. Wakeman's gone to the funny farm. Get on the phone, book him a place in the home for the chronically groovy. He's gone. And I had all these sort of weird and wonderful ideas and things that I wanted to do, but I had to be very, very careful about how I presented them.
And actually, the Ozzy track turns out to be one of the best things on the record.
Well, I talked to Ozzy about it when I did the Osmosis album with him 4 years ago. I said, Ozzy, I'd love to do something, because the Osmosis album was a classic album, I thought, because Ozzy has almost been typecast by a lot of people as to what styles and things he sings in. He's a clever boy, Ozzy, musically, and Osmosis, so you hear tracks like Perry Mason on there. It's a good track. And I said, I'd love to have you doing something like really a fish out of water. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'd love to write a sort of a metal song for you, but instead of having all the parts played by the standard instruments that we assume always play the metal stuff, like the heavy guitars, all the pedals and things, I said, I'd love to have that all done by the string sections, like shuffle the pack of cards and say, hey, guess what, strings, you've got the guitar part. Hey, guess what, trombones, you've got the bass part, that sort of thing. And I said, and instead of having the normal BVs, backing vocals done by the guys in the band, have it done by a classical choir. are, but you singing exactly as you would. And he said, oh, I'm up for that. He did a fantastic job. Personally, I think it works, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you some of the things that I really like about this record, and then, if you don't mind, I'll tell you some things that I wish you'd done differently.
Please, absolutely, please do.
Well, some of the things I like, I mean, obviously, you compare the two records, and I've had 25 years with the first one and 2 weeks with this one, so it's not really fair, but one of the best things is, you got great singers, and the guys who sang on the first one were marginal at best singers, I would say.
Yeah.
I wonder if in looking back on the first one, if you thought that, that vocals could have been one thing that would have been improved.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad analogy. The first one was difficult because I had the choice of, do I get guest singers in, but there's really only 4 songs. Do I get guest singers in and feature and do what they did with the orchestral versions of Tommy, which is, and then you suddenly fill it full of guests? Or do you go the other route and have everybody on stage completely unknown so that the focus then goes on to the music? And I think there's very valid arguments both ways, and I'm not really sure what the utopia would be. But certainly when we came to do this one, this was an area where I wrote songs specifically for singers. I think it's valid what you say.
Yeah. Another thing that I like about this is that your playing is more expansive. There are parts of this where I say, wow. The first album, I think it really clings together as a symphonic thought, as a whole piece. This is like a dream to hear Rick Wakeman playing like this again.
There's totally different thinking for this one. I mean, you are right, and there's an element of the old Robert Fripp thinking in this. When you're 23, 24, 25 years old, the word silence when you're playing, in other words, don't play here, is something that is not in your vocabulary. You'll play something even if it's not right or the wrong instrument, just because you want to be playing. You don't want to be seen doing nothing. Robert Fripp, I did a few sessions with Fripp back in the 70s, and one of the things that Robert does, I remember doing one session with him, and he didn't play for about 2 minutes. And I said, "You're going to do something here?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because there isn't anything for me to play." And he said, I should play in that little section coming up there, and then nothing there, then there, and there, and there. Now, what was amazing, when I listened back to the track that we did then, all that seemed to stick out was what Robert had did. And he said, that's because I've got 6 entries and 6 exits. He said, if you only have 1 entry and exit, he said, it loses the track. He said, and if I want to play an important part, he said, then I play where necessary and play the sound of the things where necessary. And that's something that I have to say I've tried to do much more of in recent years, and certainly with this album, all the keyboard solos, for example, none of them went down until everything else had been recorded.
So you knew when to put in your entrances and exits.
Exactly.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Now, the thing that I wish you had done differently is I wish this were shorter, and I don't wish it were shorter because there's stuff that shouldn't be on here.
Right.
But you're 50, or you're going to be 50. I just turned 40, and I listened, and I can't tell you the last time I had an hour and 15 minutes to listen to something. And I have 2 little kids in the house, and it's just chaos all the time, and it's very hard to sit down. And I go, God, I just said that's I guess the beauty of the first one is I wish there were more.
36 minutes.
36 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's the original demo runs to 125 minutes. Now, I knew that it was always going to come down from there because, of course, the narration is overblown. A lot of the things are overblown, so you're continually editing and editing and editing and editing and editing to bring it, to bring it down to it sounds tight. It was always going to end up as what it was going to end up, and it ended up at 76.50 or something. You're quite right. But I too have kids running around the house, and I can sympathise there.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this. I like that era of music is nobody's really ever gone back and done that, and I think that's the best era of music there was. People can make fun of art rock or whatever they want to call it all they want, but I mean you had the best players playing some of the most inventive, interesting music of all time.
And it was interesting you picked up on the singers. I looked at the same juncture as do I get some of my friends, some of the classic players the instrumentalists to play the band parts, and I ended up using a band where the guitarist is 24, the drummer's 23, and the bass player's 23. And it was really incredible because these are guys, they're great players, and they, exactly what you said, they said, look, we love that era. We know it got knocked by people on the art rock thing, exactly, but what a great time for musicians, what a great time to be able to play. So whilst a lot of people say to, people who don't like art rock and classical rock and orchestral rock, call it what you like, who say, the problem is it's all contrived. You try saying that to the musicians that play it, because the first thing they'll turn around to you and say, we've never had so much freedom to show any ability or what we can do. There's no other music that allows us to do this. Now, art rock is a genre of music that in general people either love or they hate. I mean, for example, reviews for this album in the UK were, it's been good. 70% of them have been fantastic, but we've had another percentage, about 20%, where it's from people who just can't stand the orchestral rock, have never been able to stand it, and would dearly like to take me to one of the entrances to the centre of the earth, drop me down it, and then close the entrance up. And unlike any other type of music, they suddenly become really opinionated, because people say, this is fantastic, I'm so glad something like this is happening, this is absolutely wonderful, it's great music, it's great, and just go off into a euphoria that's almost embarrassing. And then, as I say, then two down the line, you can read a guy, why doesn't somebody assassinate Wakeman? Why don't they just open up the centre of the earth and drop him in it? And it's to some extent it makes me smile, but it also makes it's interesting that in that era of the 70s as well, we were all, whether we were fans of one type of music or not, we were all passionate about our music, and it's interesting that this type of music does bring the passion back one way or another.
When I was in high school and listening to this, and I would listen to we would have arguments. You talk about passion, arguments every day about who's better, Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson, who's better, Steve Howe or Jimmy Page, stuff like that.
I could solve the first one for you, because Keith and I have been great friends for years and years and years, and we always thought it was a lot of fun that these things kept coming up in newspapers, who's best, because the interesting thing is we are two totally different styles of players in every respect. I mean, Keith and I have actually agreed that if you could take my right hand and his left hand, you've probably got the epitome of what's needed. But we've agreed that we're not going to have the operation. What we are going to do, we're going to do a tour together next year instead.
Really?
Yeah. We've been working on this now for about 6 months, so we're going to go out and we're going to put together, and this is not where he's on stage for a bit and I'm on stage, this is where we're working together solidly for an evening.
And what are you going to do? I mean, will you have a band with you?
We'll have a band, we may even have an orchestra. We're past the embryo stage. It's now, Keith and I have been quietly working on this now for about 4 or 5 months.
Are you going to bring that to the U.S.?
It's going to be in the U.S. That's where it'll start. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
From all the players that you've played with and all the players that you know of, is there a Rick Wakeman dream band? Could you put one together?
Gosh, a dream band? There's a few people I'd like to play with who I never have played with, I must admit. I mean, I would love to do something with McCartney. I would, even if it's just to sit up on stage and play something. There's so many great musicians around. I would like to see. I had a great time in the session days when I was going around playing loads of people's sessions. It was just great fun. I do enjoy working on other people's music. I enjoy working with other people. Dream band. I mean, a lot of the guys I always dreamed of playing with or wanted to play with. I've done people like Brian May. I've worked with Steve Vai and Joe Satriani was great fun. I've been extraordinarily lucky. Perhaps on a band side of things, there are 2 bands I would have loved to have worked with who didn't have keyboard players, who I would have jumped at the chance to have become the keyboard player of those bands. One was The Who and the other one was Zeppelin. If those 2 bands had decided that they'd wanted a keyboard player, I would have put in my application. So I'd have filled in the form and sent off the CV.
Are you going to tour with the Return?
Yeah, very much so. I want to. It's a bit frustrating at the moment. It's going to cost an arm and a leg to put this on, as you can appreciate.
Oh, yeah.
So it will need sponsorship and all the things along that go with it. We've got sponsors and people standing by who really want to get involved and do it. But they're all just waiting, quite rightly so, to see how the album's received. If it's received well and does okay, then there's no doubt about it, they'll press the green light and away we'll go. But of course there argument's going to be, if it doesn't do what people hope, they're going to say, well, look, why should we invest in a show? Where's the audience going to come from? But we know we can make the show really work because all the major cities around the world have got great symphony orchestras and choirs. It's not that difficult to actually stage it and do it. The difficulty is finding the underwriters and the sponsors, and they're only going to come forward once we know how the album's actually doing. And that's probably going to be, I would think, decisions will start to be made around about the end of June.
Isn't it amazing to you how much business plays a part in music anymore?
It's sad. Yeah. It's very sad. And what's frustrating for me was back in the 70s, the money that I earned from the records, there were no such things as sponsors. There weren't. I mean, when I did the original Journey tour in America, I lost $250,000. We sold out everywhere. We sold out all 18 shows, but it lost $250,000, which is a fortune now. You imagine what it was back then. But I'd made $250,000 on the sales of the record. So I put all the money back in to do the tour, knowing that it would lose the money. And I didn't have to, the manager saying to me, oh, you're mad, you're crazy to do this, you can't do it. I said, I don't care, it's my money, I'll do what I like with it. I want to go out on tour, I want to take an orchestra, so I'm going to do it. If I was in the position today where I had some money in the bank and I could afford to go out and spend it all and put this on the road without having to talk to people, I would do it. But you're dead right, it's turned into a business now where you're reliant upon other people, and it is the business side of things, it takes priority.
Are you glad you made your mark in music when you made it?
I wouldn't change one iota of the era that I've come through. There's nothing more fantastic than to come through a pioneering stage, and I came through the stage where keyboards were being pioneered, and I was allowed to get involved in the development of keyboards, the same as recording and technology. In the 30 years I've been doing it since I left college, I've had some fantastic highs and some stunning lows, and I suppose that's something you should expect in this business.
Is there anything else that you want me to tell people about what you're up to? Anything you want to talk about that we haven't done yet?
I think it's about covered everything. I think basically the next sort of 8 to 10 months is going to be heavily taken up with Return, and then it's going to be moving hopefully into putting the Emerson Wakeman tour together, which I'm looking forward to very much.
Oh, that's
and then after that, that's going to, when you think about it, that's going to go through 2000 into 2001. I don't know what will happen particularly after that. I've had a few health problems over the last year, so there's going to come a time when I'm going to have to quieten down a bit, and so it might be just after I've done the project with Keith, it might just be time to just sort of hold back a little bit.
What's been wrong, if you don't mind my asking?
Last year I had a bad time. I had chronic pneumonia and pleurisy in a form of Legionnaire, and I actually they only gave me 48 hours at one time. I was a pretty sick boy, and sort of went into hospital weighing 220 pound and came out weighing 180.
Wow.
I've damaged my right lung and a few other areas, and it's and I have to. I can't do the things that I used to do, and they've sort of wagged their finger at me and told me that things have to change. They basically said if I have another attack like it, then I won't come out of that one. So I've got to start looking a little bit more sensibly. And I am aware that maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, I'm going to have to maybe look more toward the continual writing side of things, maybe to move in more into the area of writing, doing movie music and or whatever, which doesn't put the same pressures on of continual travelling and and the touring and things that I'm doing at the moment.
One other just housekeeping matter, and that is when you were talking about your lowest lows, what years are we talking about there? Is it
the lows?
Is it the 80s? Yeah.
Yeah, the lows, I suppose. Probably 1980 was the year that really stank for me because my second marriage collapsed. I lost everything. It was the start of the whole punk movement, which, that's fine, but it just destroyed me. I was hitting a bad way. I then lost it. I lost a big tax case. I lost everything that I had in the second divorce. And then my father died. And that was the bad icing on the cake, because it was like, well, what else can God throw at me, And that was pretty tough. And then I went through a period of feeling extraordinarily sorry for myself for about 6 months to a year, where I really felt sorry for myself, and I felt that everybody else in the world was to blame but me. It is true that the situation that I found myself in was not totally of my own doing, but the fact of life is that at the end of the day, you do have certain control over your destiny, and you can shape things. If you want to sit there and be bloody miserable, then that's fine, but it ain't going to get get you anywhere. You know, not having a roof over my head was a real low. I mean, that was because you just wonder where you're going to go from there.
That was in 80 or 81?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh man. Well, listen, I appreciate all your time, and I wish you the best. You and your music have given me a lot of joy throughout my life.
Thank you,
and I hope that things work out well for you, Rick.
That's very, very kind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you take care of yourself, and I hope to see you here.
That'd be lovely. Please, that would be wonderful.
Okay, you take care.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Tapes Archive podcast. Please remember you can always find more information about the show and the individual episodes at our website, thetapesarchive.com. Until next time, the vault is closed.